Hello and welcome to Direct Talk. I'm Salam Brhane, your host for the day. Joining us in the studio is Getachew Reda, advisor to the President of Tigray and member of Central Command. Getachew, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yesterday marks a year from September 9th Tigray election. The Ethiopian government at the time had postponed elections under the pretext of the coronavirus pandemic. Why did the ruling party TPLF, of which you're an executive member of, deem it necessary to go forward with the election?
For one thing, holding elections is the most normal thing one would do if you at least have a pretension of being democratic, let alone the people of Tigray who have paid dearly for their right to self-determination, the right to vote, and other democratic rights. So it was only natural that we decided to go ahead with elections in accordance with the Constitution. Second, we knew the regime in Addis Ababa was facing a legitimacy crisis. And the legitimacy crisis emanated mostly from the fact that it was not heeding the calls of the people of Ethiopia or heeding the calls of international partners to remain faithful to the promises it had made when it came to power. And we didn't want TPLF as a ruling party of Tigray to also continue to face a legitimacy crisis, because we knew we needed the mandate of our people in order to govern, in order to address multifaceted issues that Tigray had to grapple with. The threat that was being flung against us, posed by Abiy and his partners in crime, including Isaias Afwerki and Amhara expansionists. Whatever the consequences of COVID, we knew we could contain them. We knew we could take, and we did, appropriate measures to mitigate the consequences, but we had to address the legitimacy crisis. Like I told you, the first important consideration for us was the right to self-determination was something the people of Tigray had paid dearly for, something the people of Tigray had fought to the nail for, and nothing would detract from that right, and we had to do everything in our power to make sure that the people of Tigray indeed exercise their right. And second, of course, for TPLF, it was an issue of maintaining legitimacy in the sense that it needed to renew its legitimacy by appealing directly to our people. So to the extent that our people had confidence in us, it was only incumbent upon them to express their acceptance, their confidence through the ballot box. And with legitimacy also comes the fullest possible involvement of the people of Tigray in all the multifaceted efforts that we were engaging with security, governance, development, and all other areas that mean a lot to the people of Tigray. So it simply was a question of first exercising our right to self-determination, and second, a question of ensuring the legitimacy of our people and remaining faithful to the constitutional principles that the people of Tigray had paid dearly for. And equally important, of course, it was about mobilizing the cross-section of the people of Tigray in our effort to counter all sorts of challenges, political, economic, and social.
Thank you. Some people say that the election provoked the war. What do you make of that?
No, the war had already been in the making. It's been from the get-go. Abiy and his partners, especially Isaias Afwerki, were adamant that to the extent that they would put in place a system Horn of Africa, where they would say yes and no to choices of people, to choice of government, then the only obstacle that stands in the way of their ambition was the people of Tigray and TPLF. So the people of Tigray and TPLF from the get-go were deemed obstacles to their ambition. So it was only a matter of time before they could take what they considered to be appropriate measures to make sure that TPLF and the people of Tigray were either cowed into submission or, as it turned out, destroyed wiped out from the face of the earth. The election, to even pretend for a moment that elections about people making choices led to war, that has now created a situation where we have now to make choices between the continuity or otherwise of the Ethiopian state would still be very foolhardy. To expect elections to be a source of the kind of devastating war that has been visited upon Tigray, the kind of genocidal campaign that has been unleashed by Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed and his Amhara expansionist partners, that would require a bit of a stretch. Yes, it was used as a pretext to unleash the war, but like I said, the war had been in the making for almost 3 years. The demonizing campaign of TPLF and the people of Tigray had been going on for more than 3 years before actual shooting started roughly a year ago, the 4th of November. So basically, it was a question of whether Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki were ready to live with people who are in a position to assert their rights to self-determination or not. It was a question of whether they could live with people who take their democratic rights seriously. It was a question of whether they could live with people who take their right to self-determination seriously, their democratic aspirations seriously, their constitutional principles seriously. So, yes, Abiy Ahmed considered the people of Tigray and TPLF as obstacles to his imperial ambitions in Ethiopia. He wants to coronate himself as a king of kings of Ethiopia, and the only obstacle for his imperial ambition was the people of Tigray and TPLF. So it was only a matter of time before he could pounce on TPLF and the people of Tigray. And the same was true when it comes to Isaias Afwerki, who considered the people of Tigray and TPLF obstacles to his hegemonic ambitions, pharaonic ambitions in the Horn of Africa. For Amhara expansionists, they would claim every territory that comes their way as their own, every land as their own, and it's not just the land that belongs to Tigray or the people of Tigray. It's also in Benishangul Gumuz, in Oromia, in other parts in Afar as well, in other parts of Ethiopia. So for them, the only obstacle that stood in the way of their territorial ambitions, their expansionist ambitions, were TPLF and the people of Tigray. So it was a confluence of interests of sorts that brought them together. And of course, like I said, it was a matter of time before. So the election was only used as a pretext for them to unleash a war that they have unleashed against our people. Of course, to say that it was indeed the reason and the cause of the war would require a bit of a stretch.
Even though TPLF was the winning party, the election involved various opposition parties: Tigray Independence Party, Salsai Wayane Tigray, Baitona Abai Tigray, and Asimba, including 2,600 polling stations, 2.7 million voters registered. The voter turnout was very high and exciting, with many voting for their very first time. So why do you think the central government failed to recognize the Tigrayan people's right to self-governance?
Well, it's quite obvious. The so-called central government doesn't have in its DNA the tendency or the capacity to recognize people's choices for what it is. It must be obvious for Abiy Ahmed, who publicly declared that his mother told him that he would one day become the seventh king, whatever the choice of the people of Ethiopia or the choice of people of Tigray would only be a mere statistics. It's going to be relevant whether the people of Ethiopia chose their leader or not. For him, he is the king of kings of Ethiopia, courtesy of his mother's prophecy. And I would be surprised if he were to take the choice of the people of Tigray any seriously than he did. So the most important thing is this is not a guy who would recognize the people's choice as something very important. This is not a guy who thinks the people of Tigray have the right to self-determination. This is not a guy who thinks the people of Ethiopia have the right to self-determination. So whatever he says must go. So it's quite obvious. Abiy, elections for Abiy are just minor inconveniences to be grappled with, not stuff to be taken seriously. So he's waiting for his coronation, even as we speak. He's working on his coronation, and whether that involves the will of the Ethiopian people is quite secondary as far as I was concerned. So I wasn't surprised, and I wouldn't be surprised that Abiy didn't recognize the choice of the people of Tigray.
Okay. What provoked the war on November 2020 that the Ethiopian government started under the pretenses of law enforcement?
Well, it's quite obvious. Abiy and Isaias had been on record threatening action against Tigray. Abiy was on record threatening the people of Tigray against any serious moves such as exercising their right to vote. He boldly declared that he would ensure the mothers of Tigray would lose their children and their properties destroyed and their infrastructures absolutely demolished if they go ahead with elections. I mean, it was quite obvious. But in the run up to the flare up of hostilities on the 4th of November, Abiy had already deploying practically all Ethiopian ANDF divisions either inside or around Tigray. Most of them were deployed in Gondar. Probably many of them were deployed around Raya. And the Northern Command people were also given contingency papers to take action against TPLF leaders and the special police forces that we had back then. So what transpired on the 4th of November was people who didn't think heeding Abiy's remark, Abiy's orders to attack Tigray was constitutional. Those who didn't think it was a good idea to heed Abiy's remark said so and acted with us to neutralize the kind of moves some of Abiy's staunch supporters in the Northern Command were about to make. And second, all the forces that were deployed around there had already started the hostilities, and it was simply a question of time, like I said, before Abiy and Isaias would unleash their invasion. But it was part of a long process that culminated in the kind of hostilities that erupted on the 4th of November. But it had long been in the making, and I don't think it could have been avoided unless there was a change of heart on the part of Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed, and it would be naive for us to expect that kind of change of heart, because they were adamant that the only thing that stood in their either territorial or imperial or pharaonic ambitions in the Horn of Africa was TPLF and the people of Tigray. And so they had to be eliminated at all costs. That was pretty much why the war was unleashed on Tigray.
Okay, thank you. There are accusations from central government that you are conspiring with foreign powers to dismantle Ethiopia. How do you respond to that?
Well, Abiy has conspired with foreign powers, including Isaias Afwerki, to dismantle Ethiopia. And Abiy has done a very excellent job of making sure that Ethiopia is dismantled. I don't think I can outdo Abiy in his job of dismantling Ethiopia. He has already done it in a very super manner. It's very unfortunate. We're dealing with the destruction, not just destruction of property and infrastructure, but also the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. Abiy Ahmed is sending ill-equipped, armed tens of thousands of soldiers as cannon fodder. Since the liberation of Mekelle and many parts of Tigray, we've been fighting. Even as we speak today, we're fighting. And the number of people, most of them unarmed, most of them carrying machetes, some of them carrying backward weapons that are being sent as cannon fodder is quite staggering. TPLF has never conspired with any foreign power. In fact, we are under siege now. There is no outlet for Tigrayan armed forces to count on for missiles or for munitions or for artillery pieces. We can only count on Abiy Ahmed's army for artillery, for tanks, for armored personnel carriers, for munitions. As we speak today, we have captured more weapons than we have captured the last months or so, courtesy of course, Abiy Ahmed's forces. So who are we going to conspire with when there is no outlet whatsoever that we can contact, when there is no communication whatsoever, when the people of Tigray have been cut off from the rest of the world and from the rest of Ethiopia, when humanitarian access to the needy here in Tigray is being deliberately denied by Abiy Ahmed? What sort of conspiracy can we possibly manage to have with the rest of the world? I am hard-pressed to find any entity that we can have a decent communication with, let alone to conspire against the Ethiopian state. But the bottom line is Abiy has done a very good job of dismantling Ethiopia by collaborating with a guy who the last 60 years of his life made it his vocation to dismantle Ethiopia. Isaias Afwerki has never had any vocation than dismantling Ethiopia. So he has been working day and night, hand in glove, with Isaias Afwerki and with Amhara expansionists. Amhara expansionists would have you believe that they have the best interest of the Ethiopian state, no matter what that means. Whatever that means. But they still are working with Isaias Afwerki, the most implacable enemy of Ethiopia. And to accuse TPLF or the Tigrayan armed forces of conspiring with foreign forces to dismantle Ethiopia, that's quite preposterous. In fact, Abiy has done a very good job, tragically of course, a very good job of dismantling Ethiopia, working in collaboration with people whose only lifetime vocation is dismantling Ethiopia. Isaias Afwerki, of course, springs to mind.
Okay, thank you. Do you believe there is a peaceful solution to our current situation?
Well, as long as there is commitment to peace, especially if the Ethiopian people somehow find it in their heart to ask seemingly serious questions such as, where are our kids going? What happened to the hundreds of thousands of soldiers we sent to Tigray? Whatever happened to the youth who were, as you pointed out in your question, were in quite an Orwellian twist, sent on a law enforcement mission with tanks, with helicopter gunships, with Sukhoi 27 fighters, bombers. What happened to those? Whatever happened to the arsenals that were sent to destroy Tigray? Whatever happened to the tanks that were sent in law enforcement mission? If the people of Ethiopia were to ask such inconvenient questions for a moment, yes, people like Abiy Ahmed would stop at nothing to destroy even millions of people, as long as they think it would be in the best interest of it would be in their best interest being maintaining their grip on power. Unless such serious questions are asked by people whose voices really matter, I'm not sure if Abiy thinks the voice of the people of Ethiopia matter, peace will remain an illusion. But it's still possible. It's still possible. We have made it abundantly clear that Tigray is under siege. The people of Tigray have been cut off from communications, cut off, electricity is cut off, humanitarian aid is being denied. There is a systematic attack on Tigray's livelihoods, and we will continue to take appropriate measures until such times that our conditions are met. So, yes, it is still possible to resolve this peacefully, but it takes people who take peaceful solutions to problems seriously enough to really consider this a very viable option. But if experience is any guide, Abiy will do everything to continue the war. As long as he doesn't feel the heat, he will continue to use many more thousands, hundred thousands of people as cannon fodders. Will continue to take appropriate measures if there is readiness on the part of the people of Ethiopia and other parties to arm twist Abiy into considering peace as a viable option. There would be a possibility, but not all possibilities translate into likelihoods. That's my fear.
Thank you. Could you clarify the terms of the ceasefire negotiations and cessation of hostilities?
Well, we just made it. The cessation of hostilities can only come about if, at the very minimum, the siege that has been imposed on Tigray is lifted. What has communications to do with, telecommunication services to do with Abiy's war on Tigray? What has electricity to do with Abiy's war on Tigray? What has denying humanitarian food aid to the needy the war on Tigray? Let him fight his war. We'll fight our war. But let him lift the siege first. If we are going to discuss anything about cessation of hostilities or comprehensive ceasefire, the first order of business for Abiy is to at least lift the siege on the people of Tigray. He wants us to maintain a chokehold on the people of Tigray, want to continue to kill the people of Tigray through other means than the barrel of gun, because we have managed to send his forces farther away from Tigray, because we have managed to silence most of his guns, at least in this part of Tigray. Still, western part of Tigray is still suffering under Abiy and Isaias's forces. Now he wants us to continue the war. He wants us to continue our children, continue to kill our children. He wants us to continue to kill our mothers through other means. And let him stop that before even considering any talks, if you will. If we are going to settle for a negotiated ceasefire, and then there are basic, fundamental red lines that could not be compromised. So the first order of business for Abiy to lift the siege on Tigray. Of course, every square inch of our territory needs to be cleared from our enemies, be it Eritrean forces, Amhara expansionists, or Abiy's forces. That is an absolute minimum. You see, the most important is, there are so many issues that we have put forward, like the restoration of the legitimately elected government of Tigray. We have managed to do so through the barrel of gun, but we are denied our budget. We are part of the federation, and we need to get our budget. The civil service, taxpayers' money needs to be made available for our people, for our civil servants. People in urban areas are suffering, even mostly in the brink of starvation, even at times dying of starvation, because what little savings they have in the banks, they cannot access them because banking services are absolutely cut off. So these are the kinds of things we expect the so-called central government to do even before we consider sitting together and negotiating a ceasefire. These are at least the absolute minimums that I'm talking about. We have already made the details public, but at least for clarification's sake, these are the kinds of things we expect the so-called central government to do, and whoever wants to mediate, there is a plethora of efforts to mediate, and at least access to humanitarian aid, the lifting of the siege, the withdrawal of enemy forces from every square inch of Tigray territory are some of the absolute that to be made before we sit together for a negotiated ceasefire.
Thank you. You have had an interesting year, unusual for a politician in the 21st century. You were put in a position where you couldn't find food, had to walk for days. You lived with farmers in the most remote areas of Tigray. What was the experience like, and how has it shaped or affected your way of being, or rather thinking?
Well, I think, the fact that I found myself in those situations and even worse situations, I kind of consider it a blessing in disguise. I kind of got to know how resilient our people are, how wise the hardy peasant in Tigray is, and how resolute the hardy peasant in Tigray is in fighting injustice. It's very difficult to describe the kind of situation. I have seen ups and downs, and one thing that remained consistent throughout my stay with peasants is that they were absolutely confident that we would overcome this. I remember it was on the 18th, probably 16th, it must be 16th of December. We were in doldrums, to say the least. And I was climbing a very steep mountain, and there was a peasant who was at least showing us a way, and he told us in a very point-blank way, you're going to overcome this. 3-4 months, believe me. You will defeat your enemy, and he gave kinds of details, of course. The fact that I wasn't as confident, but this peasant was absolutely confident, simply meant millions of things for me. So wherever I go, this is the same level of confidence that raised kept our morals high, and of course, I saw firsthand how not just well-meaning and generous and caring the people of Tigray are, but also how determined they are in the face of injustice, how wise and how brave those hardy peasants are in the face of injustice. And if it wasn't for that kind of steely determination, I probably would not have survived. But yeah, it's for the books. Tons of things to talk about.
Great. Will bring for Ethiopian politics?
Well, it requires a very fertile imagination to put what tomorrow has in store for us as far as Ethiopian politics go. I can only say something about Tigray. There is no chance. There is no chance. Abiy and company will come to haunt my sisters, my children, my mothers. That's all I can say. If there is a determination on the part of sensible people in Ethiopian politics to call a spade, and to tell Abiy Ahmed that his murderous adventure needs to stop, there will be a chance if there is an inclusive dialogue of thoughts for us. I hope Ethiopian people deserve to deserve peace more than anyone else. The people of Tigray deserve peace. The rest of Ethiopia deserves peace as well. we in Tigray will make sure Abiy doesn't constitute a threat anymore. Amhara expansionists do not constitute a threat anymore. Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki does not constitute a threat anymore. If by doing so we contribute to Ethiopia becoming peaceful, Ethiopian politics becoming more inclusive, that would be the icing on the cake. But we are not particularly interested in punching above our weight. We are only interested in making sure the safety and security of Tigray and the people of Tigray is beyond the reach of troublemakers such as Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed. That, for us, is the most important objective, and we're confident with our people, with the determination of our armed forces, we'll be able to achieve that. We still have a long way to go before making sure that those threats do not pose significant trouble to the people of Tigray, but we are on the right path, we are on the right track. But I hope by doing so, we'll also contribute to making Ethiopian politics much more inclusive and much more peaceful. That's all I can say.
Thank you for your time, Getachew, and Happy New Year.
You too.
Thank you. That wraps up our program for today. Again, I'm Salam Berhana. Thank you for watching. See you next week at the same time with another guest.